most things that you are indulging in is just something fun, a little bit of chocolate, your fucking iPhones, the Cobalt, the whatever it is just soaked in misery and violence and suffering. Like the whole thing still is interconnected. Yeah. I mean, now that being said, what are you supposed to do about that? Are you gonna stop eating chocolate or using your phone?
Well, that's what's crazy. It's like they've got us addicted. Particularly, well, chocolate would be an easier one, but phones. We are all willingly addicted to these things. We are all checking our email and posting stuff and, using it for our podcasts and you're using it. It's a device. It's important. You have to have it.
You have to have it.
But it's all connected to cobalt mining, which is one of the most horrific things that's happening right now on planet Earth. And if people in the cities in America were forced to live like that, everyone would be up in arms. But yet people are tweeting about letting people through the border crisis. We have this border problem. We need to help these people. They're tweeting it on a phone made by slaves. Yeah. Which is the wildest thing ever.
It's very odd. It's very odd.
And rarely discussed.
It's ignorance. And like this is in Buddhism, there's three, like the root of suffering. One of them is ignorance. And ignorance is not like you're ignorant, you're a dumbass. It's like you're actively ignoring shit. Like, this is one of the nightmare weed situations, is when you've been ignoring some shit in your life. And even though it's there, you've just been ignoring it. And then you get high. Yeah. And it's like, I'm not going to let you ignore this for a little bit. Yeah. And then you have the bad weed trip, because now suddenly you're like looking at a relationship that is shitty in your life that needs to improve, or you're looking at like how you don't exercise or whatever the thing is. Yeah. So you've been actively ignoring that and thinking that is going to make the situation better, even though when you're actively ignoring something, you feel it. Yeah. And it might not be at the top of mind, but you're like feeling it, and it's heavy. It's a heavy thing when you're procrastinating. That's active ignorance. So I think collectively, that's what we're doing here, is this active ignorance of the reality that these things don't pop out of thin air. Yeah. That if we're going to have this level of luxury, some people are going to have to suffer for it.
But that's not necessarily true. They don't have to. They just are. It's not like you couldn't figure out a way where the company profits slightly less, the people live far better, and phones cost reasonably close to what they cost to now. The problem, you look at a company like Apple, just the amount of money that they've generated from devices, and what percentage of it is phones? What percentage of what they sell involves cobalt? I mean, most of their lithium-ion battery products, cobalt is like some sort of a stabilizer or something.
No idea.
Siddharth Kara, who wrote that book on cobalt, who came on the podcast and had this, it was one of the most heavy podcasts I've ever done. Because you're sitting here and he's exposing how these people are living, how these 19-year-old mothers have babies on their backs and they're digging into these hills to get cobalt, and the dust is coming up, and it's horrific for them. Terrible health consequences. They're being poisoned, and they're making no money, and they have no electricity.
Yeah, and don't forget that those cobalt mines are not even owned by Africans. They're usually owned by like Chinese.
Yeah, and if you just imagined that instead those people lived in an economically thriving town like Detroit was when they were putting together automobiles. Like Detroit, at one point in time, was one of the richest cities in the country. Yeah. Detroit was a huge hub. There was beautiful cars everywhere. America was making these cars, and they were selling like crazy. The industry was booming, and then they pulled it all out. Yeah. And then the city imploded. Like if you went to Detroit when did Detroit fall apart? When did the auto manufacturers pull a giant chunk of their production out of Detroit? What year was that? Because it's a very stark cliff economically. It's like Roger and Me when he made that documentary.
Oh yeah,
1960s. Right. When a building boom pushed people to the suburbs. Population plummeted to 700,000 with the highest unemployment rate, more than 16% in any major American city.
Yeah.
So it started with the building boom, pushed back people into the suburbs, but I think the big one was the automobile. So what is Detroit's downfall? Yeah, it's the heavily automobile-centric industrial landscape of Detroit, established in the first half of the 20th century, led to rapid declines in population and economic output after automotive decentralization.
I think that means that they took their factories to other countries with fewer regulations.
It's exactly what they did. It's exactly what they did. And it makes you think, like, man, what did you do? What did you do? Like, how much more profit? I'm sure it's a lot of money.
A lot.
But what did you do?
Yeah,
when you think about that, that you could have all those people working for you, and you're like, you know what? We're going to go over there because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Fuck your life.
Yeah. Well, it's just business, baby.
Crazy.
It's just business. That's another thing. You know, people say that. It's just business is like usually encapsulates this Machiavellian attitude towards humanity as a whole. It's just business. Look, what do you want us to do? We're trying to make the most profit. This is the job. It's a business. This is what we do. And what are like the question is, okay, so what do you do? Like, do you hyper-regulate private companies and tell them, no, you can't do that. You can't leave. We're going to keep you here. We're going to put embargoes on.
Yeah, you can't do that.
So
because then the government would have control.
Not only
There'd
that,
be too much control over what a corporation does.
Every single thing that involves workers' rights pushes us one step closer to full automation. Every single thing over time. When it gets to the point that operating an Android is less expensive than paying for a human, there will be no more human workers.
That's Andrew Yang's thing. Yeah.
Andrew Yang says that?
Yeah, Andrew Yang talks about automation and how automation is going to kill so many jobs and that people aren't prepared for it. And that's one of the reasons why he was pushing universal basic income.